everyone. It's Monday evening, and I figured I'd check in to tell you what I've been up to reading-wise today. I finished this book. This is a middle grade fiction. This is Refugee by Gratz, and a friend of mine had loaned me this book several months ago, so it's been on my TBR for quite a few months, and I figured this was a great time to read through it on my vacation. So this story, it's basically the three different stories in one, that each chapter rotates from the perspective of one of the three different stories. So we have Joseph, who is a Jewish boy fleeing Nazi Germany on a boat to Cuba. We have Isabel, who, that was in 1930s, obviously. And then we have Isabel, who is a Cuban girl fleeing Cuba on a raft in 1994. And then we have Muhammad, who is fleeing Syria with his family in current day, 2015, I believe. Yeah, 2015. Fleeing Syria, trying to get to Germany. So all three of these young people with their families, and detailing the trauma and the dangers that they encounter on the way, trying to find a safe place that they can then call home, because their homes are no longer safe for them. And this is a very compulsively readable book. The way that it's structured with these short chapters, each from a different person's perspective, each of these three characters' perspectives. So you're just constantly turning the pages, and each of the storylines is strong. So it's not like I wanted to read one more than the other, but I wanted to know what happened to each of them. So it just kept me flying through the pages. I actually sat down and read this all in one sitting this morning. It was a very fast read. So yeah, it was a great vacation read, but it was also, I cried at the end. It was very sad at the end because, there aren't always happy endings with these kinds of stories. And a lot of what is in this fictional story is actually true events that happened, that the author has then, fictionalized around the piece that is true. So that makes it even more emotionally compelling to read. So I really do recommend this. I was given this by a friend of mine who read this as part of a class project last year in a middle school in my area, and she really loved it as well, and thought I would like it. And I can highly recommend it if you have kids that are sort of in the middle grade reading years. I think this would be an excellent choice for you to read with your child, or for your child to read on their own. I thought it was great. I think this is a fun read. No, I shouldn't say a fun read. This is a heart-pounding read for anyone, really. I really enjoyed my time spent with this, and I think it does offer insight into what refugees go through. So it's important. And then there's some information at the end for what you can do to help refugees in the current day. So yeah, I think this is a great book. So anyway, that's what I've been reading today on Monday, and I will check in with you later. Hello there. It is Wednesday, August 11th, and I finished another book yesterday, so I figured I would check in. This is The View from Flyover Country, Dispatches from the Forgotten America by Sarah Kendzior, and this book was published, she self-published this collection of essays back, I think, in 2015, and then it was re-released in 2018 by Flatiron Books. And so these essays were originally written and published during Kendzior's time working for Al Jazeera, and so that was like between 2012 and 2014. And these are very political in nature, and they talk a lot about the way that parts of America have sort of become incomprehensible to other parts of America. And it goes beyond sort of the red state, blue state dividing line that a lot of political discussion centers on. And this is more about, what is happening in the forgotten parts of America, whether it's decaying urban areas like St. Louis, where the author is from, or it's, rural parts of the Midwest that are considered flyover country. She kind of details, how things in those areas are not acknowledged. Like the problems that are really happening are not acknowledged. And so I had thought this was going to be really, a rural versus an urban type of an essay collection, but it really isn't. It's more about economic issues than anything else. It talks a lot about, and because these are essays that were written and published on the internet originally, there's a lot of overlap in her themes and her discussion points. She talks a lot about minimum wage and how that is not the way the minimum wage jobs, particularly in the service sector, like food service or other those types of jobs in the service sector are not paying a livable wage. And so you have folks that can't survive, they might be working 2 jobs and they can't survive. But she also talks about not only those kind of jobs, but professional jobs where people have to have college degrees in order to have those jobs, like being a professor at a university, about how 70% of those jobs are now adjunct professors who are not paid as full-time employees. Instead, they are contract workers who work without benefits and are paid per class that they teach, and how so much of university instruction has now switched over to that. And she talks about how in many industries like journalism, in order to break into that industry, you have to work in unpaid internships, and that's only possible if you have funding from some other source to help you live while you do that kind of work. So if you come from a poor background, like obviously you're not going to be able to move to a really expensive city and do an internship for free in order to break into a job career. I mean, a career, not jobs and careers are the same thing, right? She talks about how this bleeds into like things like the diplomatic service. Like in order to break into that area of work, if you could go to school and learn political science, international relations, that sort of stuff. But unless you can afford to move to an expensive city overseas and work for the UN for free as an intern for some amount of time, like it's very difficult to break into that particular area of work. So she talks a lot about how there's barriers set up and how the gap between the very wealthy and everybody else is just widening and widening, and that we have all these structures in place that sort of hold people in the position in which they're born and do not give anybody an opportunity to move beyond that. And how, so that whole idea of upward mobility and meritocracy and all these things are really a myth, and we need to be more realistic about what life is like in America. And that the problem with people who live in sort of elite circles is they have no concept that these things are problems, and that the majority of Americans are sort of locked out of ways to build wealth and to move ahead. So I thought these were like any essay collection about a particular topic, they can get a little repetitive. But her points, I think, even though they were written 10 years ago, are certainly relevant today, especially as we discussed, we're trying to come out of this pandemic and rebuild the economy, and all the discussion in America right now about how there's all these industries that are finding it hard to find people to come back to work in them, like the food service industry. And because they're still paying the same that they were paying back in 2012 when these essays were originally written, and they're still offering the same crappy schedules and the same, not 40-hour a week opportunities and no benefits, and nobody has health care, and like all these problems still exist. And then people wonder why they can't fill a job. So yeah. Very, very enlightening and worthy of a read and a think and a discussion. So that's where I'm at with that. Today is another day of reading here at the lake, and I will check in with you later.